Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Building Bridges, Finding and Connecting with Your Community as a Cancer Survivor, led by Rebecca Morse. This program is hosted by the Blum Resource Center. Over at the Blum, we are grateful to Becca for this continued partnership. The recording of this session will be posted on our Blum YouTube playlist and our Blum Digital Resource Center. For those of you watching live, if you have any questions related to today's program, please feel free to utilize the chat feature throughout the session. At the end of the session, your questions in the chat will be used to moderate our question and answer. If you have any other questions or would like more information about resources and programs offered through the Blum, please visit our website at www.dana-farber.org/resource center or email us at blum_center@dfci.harvard.edu. Thank you all for joining us. I will now pass the workshop over to you, Becca.
Thanks, Sierra. So hi, I'm Rebecca. I am the social worker in the Pediatric Survivorship Clinic here at Dana-Farber. Work with the Perini Clinic. So I specifically work with folks who had cancer when they were in childhood or early adolescence. And many of our patients are now adults who are living in life after cancer. So that's kind of the track that I come from as I put these presentations together. However, I'm hopeful that this is applicable to folks who are really in any stage of cancer treatment or survivorship. So we're going to be talking today about how you build your community outside of, after cancer, outside of the cancer world. So just to start you with an agenda so you know what to expect today, we're going to do a little bit of a welcome, which we're doing right now. We're going to talk about why community matters, and we're going to talk about what you're looking for and how to find that, and where you can look. And then I'm going to give you some really practical tools for searching for your community, as well as for navigating challenges. And my goal is for you to walk out of here with a bit of an action plan, or at least the scaffolding for one, for putting together, some more community resources in your life. And what we're going to be doing is talking about really just life after cancer and how that can be a really, really empowering time, but also a really lonely time. So the session today, I'm going to give you a lot of information, but I really, we wouldn't be talking about community if we weren't trying to have some community support throughout this session, because we're in the webinar format. You won't be able to see each other, but you can put questions into the chat. You can reach out directly through email after the fact. And we're going to be talking about social and informal group supports. So what that means is supports in your community at home, supports in your already existing family or friend network, how to access them. We're not going to be talking about formal mental health supports, and more on that in a second. But I really want to give you the guidance of take what helps, leave the rest, and move at your own pace through this. So if you are watching live, that is wonderful, and I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this recorded, you can always pause and keep going as you want to. For those of you who are here live, this is going to be posted so you can come back to it at a later time if there are things that are helpful for you at a later point. If you are here looking for more formal support, and what I mean by that is a therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist, or a formal evidence-based support group, that's not so much what we're going to talk about today. But do please find our other video that we have with the Blum Center Library on how to find a therapist, where we try to touch on those topics. And if you want, you can take a picture of this page, because that's the link to it right there. If you're here today with an urgent mental health need, and by that I mean something that is impacting your safety or your ability to function in real time, I want you to call 911 or go to an emergency room. We're not going to be addressing, much more in terms of crisis support during this program, but I think that that's something that comes up for a lot of people. So I just want you really aware of the supports that are out there. In Massachusetts, we have access to these really cool community behavioral health centers I refer to those as similar to a mental health urgent care. They're open 24 hours a day. You can call them, you can just walk in. And if you need someone to talk to today who is a professional and who can help you with the stuff that you need, that's where I want you to reach out to. There are also a number of really good hotlines right here on this list. So I just want to start with that information. So before we get into too much, I want to take a moment to just do a quick grounding exercise with all of you. So wherever you are right now, if you're able to sit and put both feet on the floor, that's very helpful. I'm going to walk you through just a couple of deep breaths where we're going to be really intentional and just try to bring our heart rates down, bring our pacing down, just so that we go into this space, together and intentionally. So if you can, and if you want to, close your eyes. And I'm going to have you breathe in for 2 and out for 4. And we'll do that a number of times. So together, let's breathe in for 1, 2, and then out for 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, in for 1, 2, and out for 1, 2, 3, 4. And one more time, in for 2 and out for 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I feel more calm. I hope you do too. And you can always use that as a tool in the future if you're finding that you need a grounding moment. So let's talk a little about how you'll use this webinar. You're going to see these little icons, this little brain icon and this little camera icon. So that's, I hope, just to jog you to think about, pausing to reflect when you see the little brain icon, and to jog you to think about pausing to take a picture when you see the little camera icon. So you can use your phone for that. You can take a screenshot. I also think it's a great idea to have a notebook or your notes app open throughout this presentation. There are going to be times when I stop and ask you to write something down. I think that the way to get the most out of it is to really engage with it in that way. And again, we're recording, so you can come back and watch this content later. So we're going to start by talking about why does community matter and what is the point of building up a community. So connection is healing. Right. So we have a lot of really valuable science on this, that social support is linked with all of these great sounding things like lower distress, better quality of life, improved symptom management, adherence to follow-up care. What does that mean? That means that having social supports and having connection leads to better health outcomes. We also find that people who report higher levels of social support are reporting less isolation, that they're feeling more validated in their experiences, and that in life after cancer, during that time when you're trying to get everything back together because everything's been disrupted, we see people who have more supports and more social supports who are able to rebuild their identities in a way that feels easier. So what it comes down to, community complements your medical team. So I truly do believe that having more community can give you better health outcomes. So I want you to take a second here and reflect. Why does community matter to you? And my guess is you are watching this for a reason. There's something about your community that you're feeling like you want to strengthen or would be helpful to you. And I want you to be really, again, I'm going to use the word intentional about that. What is it about community that is going to help you in your life and in your healthcare journey? We're going to take another minute to reflect here. And then if you're at home, you can always pause and you can always take as much time as you need with this. You may also want to take a second and just jot some stuff down in your journal. Okay, so moving along. Before we can talk about how to connect, we want to ask, what are you looking for? And I sometimes reframe that for folks as the question of, what do I need right now? So there are big long-term goals in terms of community, but when you're dealing with cancer and these really acute in the moment things, you probably want to figure out, are your current needs being met? And if not, how do we meet them before we go into the broader scale? So some examples of things that we hear a lot from folks that they are looking for in terms of their community are emotional support, really practical help. So that means transportation, help with childcare, the old cliche thing of bringing over a casserole. We have a lot of folks who will tell us that they need information so that they can make informed decisions. And we also have a lot of folks who are having trouble speaking up for the things that they need, and they're hoping for some help with advocacy. We also hear from a lot of folks who want help finding identity specific spaces, or spiritual care, wellness activities, creative spaces, or really concrete, what we call psychoeducation. So education about things like finances and, returning to work after cancer. So those are just examples of what someone might be looking for. And I want you to think about your support needs as themes, right? So if there are a number of times where it's coming up of, oh, I really needed childcare, for these couple of hours, or I really needed transportation. Think about the theme of, maybe in general, your transportation needs aren't being met. And is there a way to address that in a more broad scale? So another thing that I think is really important to think about before saying, here's how I'm going to address this need, is, what are your constraints and preferences? Another word that I think often gets used around this is, what are your barriers to receiving help? Because how I receive help may be really different from how you receive help. And some of that comes down to like actual logistics. And some of it comes down to my personal preferences and my boundaries. So an example of a constraint may be somebody who doesn't have easy access to transportation. Maybe they don't have a car or they don't drive. That is a constraint around then being able to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to go meet my friend and we're going to have a cup of coffee. Preference might be somebody saying, like, I just really prefer seeing people in person. There isn't a reason that they have to see someone in person or that they don't, but it's something that they prefer. And that's still incredibly valid and important to take note of. Boundaries are things like, I really don't want to talk about this thing with this person, or I'm okay with having people know this information about me. So again, these are all really specific and unique to your situation, but I think it can be really helpful to take a minute and think through, are any of these popping up for you? And then I also say, I want you to think about that like a wish list. So there are going to be things that are a hard stop for you. If you don't have a license and can't drive, you can't drive to somewhere that is only accessible by car. That's a hard stop when you're looking for community and you're looking to engage more with other people, right? But if you're kind of, 30-70 on, I might want to see someone in person, but there's a part of you that says it could be okay online. You may have other ways that you can connect with people that don't fit all of your boxes, but we can really try as a wish list to have those most important things happen first. So another time I want you to just stop and write some stuff down. This does not have to be a perfect list. It's better if it isn't. But I want you to just write down the top 3 things that are coming to mind for you of, I really could use this help. This is an area where I'm not having my needs met. And then after that, I want you to take a second and write, do you have 3 preferences, constraints, boundaries that take really high priority for you? And are those things that we should be considering as you put together your action plan of how to better connect with your community? So I'm going to pause for another second here and give you time to write. Okay, so we're going to move along, but if that wasn't enough time, remember you can go back to this and you can write a little bit more later. You also, if you're watching this on a recording, you can pause this and take some time to write right now. So I want to talk with you about this idea of concentric circles of support. I think this can be a really helpful framework when you start thinking about your community and also really thinking about what you need from people. And the reason that I connect with this is I think we have a lot of patients who I work with who are just in general really good people and really used to taking care of everyone around them. And it can be quite a mind shift when you are now in the seat of being a patient and needing a lot of care, or even just accepting care that normally you would be able to do things independently or you wouldn't necessarily need that. So this is a really big topic. The concentric circles of support is an idea that comes out of actually the grief, loss, and bereavement world. But it's been adopted in a number of different psychosocial realms. So it's something that, may work for you in the way that you think about things, and it may not. So again, take or leave whatever you need to from today. But the idea really is you are at the center of your circle. And if you imagine them like these rings here or like Saturn's rings, every set is going to get a little bit bigger, and so you're in the center, and then maybe your immediate family and friends are in the next circle, and then your peers are in the next circle. Again, totally going to be different for different people. Different people have different chosen family, right? But the idea is that your needs go out and up and other people's needs don't come in. So each of those circles is a barrier. So, for example, if you are in the middle of trying to rebuild life after cancer, you're trying to figure out childcare, like changes in childcare, you're trying to figure out what you're doing for work, you're trying to figure out what comes next for you and how do you manage this whole mental shift of life after cancer, right? You're right in the middle of that. So you can ask anyone on those outside circles for support in those things. But those folks shouldn't necessarily be asking you to support them around things that have to do with your cancer. So an example I hear from a lot of patients is, my great aunt seven times removed is, I see her once a year and she is really worried about me and she is feeling very distressed about my cancer. Now, in a case like that, your heart is going to really feel it for her and you're going to want to help take care of her. I would argue that it's not your job there and that you can look to who is in that person's circle of support or further out. And you could say, hey, Uncle Billy, could you actually help Aunt, Ethel to feel better about this? Because it's not somewhere that you can put your energy into right now. So again, big concept, but I just want you to start making your framework around, do you need to provide care for the people in these outside circles? Are there other people who could be providing that care so that you can focus on you and on your healing? So we're going to take another second to reflect and to write things down, similar to the circles of care, but a little bit different. So a few slides ago, I had you write down your top 3 support needs. If you were to put them into a web similar to what I'm showing on this slide here, would you be able to connect those with people who are already in your life and say, you know what, my best friend is the person who I can, cry on her shoulder. And my brother is the person who is going to show up with a casserole when I need food, but I might not necessarily want to cry on his shoulder about it. There are different people in your life who are going to be able to fit different needs for you. So before we even think about bringing in other people, I want you to figure out what are the roles that people are already filling in your life. And can you keep that really clear in your head so that next time I need X, Y, or Z, you can reach out to those people. And then you may find as you do this that you have an area where you've said, okay, I identified this need. I don't actually have someone I can fill in there. That's where the next part of this talk is going, is how to find those community supports and those people around you to fill into this web, right? So that, again, you are in the middle of that and you are supported by this web of other people. So the question, where can you look? Big question. So I want you to start local. And you may wind up connecting with people online locally, but really thinking about, who is in and local, I mean that in the most literal sense, who is in your town, your county, your state, who is already doing a really good job of fostering community. And this is a bit of a shameless plug for our social work team here at the Farber, but if you speak with any of your care providers and you say, I really need some more support, they may be able to talk with your social work team and find out, are there supports already happening that they know about? Are there things that would be useful for you? And if you're getting care at a clinic that's not the Farber, I wouldn't be at all surprised if you have a mental health care team there who could help connect you with some supports or even just be places for you to bounce ideas off of where to connect. You also may be able to find programs that are specifically for survivors or specifically for people who have experience with the disease that you have experience with really directly in your community. So for example, I live in a suburb of Boston. Our local YMCA has a cancer survivorship program. It's run through the Live Strong Foundation, and it's for anybody who lives in that town who really wants to connect with cancer survivorship support. And it has absolutely nothing to do with any hospital that someone's been treated at. And then other places you might be able to find support are community centers, libraries. You might want to take a class related to something that you're interested in. And you might not find it as a cancer specific support. You may be able to just find other people who have similar interests to you who you might enjoy spending time with. So moving us along, I want you to take a picture of this list. This is not at all comprehensive, but this is a list of different support communities that we're aware of and we've heard good things about from some of our patients. You may want to take a look and see, do any of these connect with you and what you're looking for from a support network. Some of these are more formal supports and doing actual formal support groups, but most of these have online forums, meetups, groups that are a little bit more informal, where you could meet someone else who's been through similar experiences to what you've been through. And then I also want to talk a little about online platforms and forums. We're going to talk more about this later on, but there are so many different ways to access other humans in this world today, even compared to 10 or 15 years ago. So you may find other community and other connection with people in disease or identity specific Facebook groups or Reddit communities. We're going to talk about some ways to use caution about finding these groups and to use really strong critical thinking skills around that. There are also some apps that I really like, groups like Caring Bridge or Lots of Helping Hands. They can help you coordinate with the support network that you already have. So they're not about finding other supports, but they're about ways to communicate with the people who are already plugged into that circle that we talked about earlier. And then I kind of touched on this earlier, but meetup and hobby groups, I think, are a great place to find other people because, again, those people might have nothing to do with the cancer world. They might have no experiences of cancer, but they may be able to connect with something else that you connect with as a human being. And I think there is a lot of healing value in being able to connect with people around stuff that is more innate, you know? So for example, I've had patients who've joined knitting clubs or pottery studios, and they've found that they find other people just to spend time with. And maybe those are people they can ask for help with specific concrete support needs as well. So in this pausing to reflect time, I want you to think about when you have connected with community supports in the past, what was helpful and what was not. Now, that does not have to be community support groups that had anything to do with cancer. This could be, you know, your child's PTO at school, or it could be during, you know, a time in your life when you were a teenager and you know, joined with other people in an informal way. What worked for you, and what were some things that were hard for you or different about that? And we'll take another second for you to write that down so that you can look back at that later. Okay. So moving along, we're going to talk about some practical tools because I've given you a lot of information on why you might want to connect with support groups, kind of broader scale of, you know, where you might look. But I want to talk about, like, how does this actually look? Say you found a group that you find interesting, or you found someone who, you know, you think might be able to help with different needs that you have, or you might just enjoy being around. How do you connect with them and get what you need out of those relationships? So start with baby steps. This is my advice for literally everything that anyone comes to me with, you know, in the psychosocial realm, is baby steps. We take things really small, really concrete, and really actionable. So for example, if you decided, okay, you know what, there's a Reddit forum that is linked to my disease that I'm interested in, you don't have to jump on there and write everything about yourself all at once. You might spend some time looking at it, reading different posts by different people. If there's something you really connect to, see how it feels to send a message and say, hey, I really connected with this. You don't have to put a ton of information out there. Same thing goes if you went to an in-person group or an in-person, you know, like let's say you went to a knitting meetup. You don't have to talk to anyone there. You can just show up, be polite, be normal, and, you know, go through your day and decide, what do I think of these people? Do I want to share more with them? Do I want them to be part of my support network? So it's not 0 to 60, it's baby steps. And then in, you know, more of your own already established community support, you know, something that we find a lot, and I haven't talked much about yet, is after cancer, people seem like they kind of recede from their support groups. Not all people, but some people do. And their support groups sometimes recede from them. So during cancer, we hear that people often have a huge outpouring of support from their family, their friends, the people around them who say, oh, this is what is happening to you. Here's how we help you, right? In life after cancer, your life starts to find some new level of normal. And the people around you who may have come in and held you, they're going to go back to the things in their life that are pressing needs, right? And that is a normal part of the process, and it's okay. And it can feel very isolating. So a baby step way to deal with that is to initiate some of those conversations. Maybe you had a friend who was reaching out to you super regularly and they've started to step back because they don't see that you have the same need as you had before. Shoot them a text and just check in, you know, once a week and say, hey, just checking in this week, blah, blah, blah happened. You know, it doesn't have to be a big deal. I am also a huge fan of using scripts. So if you have one of these phones that when you're texting, it auto fills in things that you might want to say next, that's the idea that I want you to have in your head of you are in X situation and this is Y thing that you can say during that situation, right? So say you're joining a new group for the first time. I might say, hi, I'm Rebecca. I finished treatment for ALL in September. I'm looking for some connection with other people. I might be really quiet at first. And I think that last sentence is the most important takeaway I want you to have there is it is okay to tell people what you are able to bring to the table right now and what you're looking for from them. So an example of that is under the script for reconnecting. I've been off the grid. Can we catch up for 15 minutes next week? I don't need a fix. I just need company. Right. So what you're saying to, whoever it is that you're trying to reconnect with, this is what I need from you. I need company. I need this because I think when people don't know what you need, they try to fill it in with what they think they would need in that situation. And I think it does a kindness for them to say, hey, you know what? This is actually what I'm reaching out to you for and looking for. And I think it can take some of the anxiety away from that situation for you to, know this is what you're going to be able to expect from this person. I also really like this line on boundary setting. So, thanks for caring. I'm not up for discussing scan details. Can we talk about the weather instead? You may not be subtle about it. It can sometimes help not to be subtle about it because what I want you to do is to clue in the people who are in your support network to exactly what you need. And sometimes people, like we all know this, sometimes people say stuff that's not the right thing for the situation. We have all at some point in our lives put our foot in our mouth. So being able to say to someone with grace, you know what, that's not something that I want to engage in right now. I'm going to give you a very clear social cue that we're going to change the subject versus going along with what they're saying and, then inside feeling really bad about it. I think it can be a kindness to that person to say, hey, we are not talking about this right now. I really still want you in my life and I want you around though. So let's talk a little bit more about navigating challenges that you may come up with when you are trying to engage either with new people or re-engage with people in your lives. Because we hear that a lot of things come up for people here. And I think community can sometimes be hard. And one of the reasons that I think that happens is because in most things in life, the only variable you can truly control is yourself, right? So you can only control how you act in a situation, what you bring to the table, what you say. When you have somebody else who is in that situation, as much as you can give them guidance, you can assert your boundaries, you can let them know what you need from them. Sometimes people are wild cards. Sometimes people will just say some stuff, right? And especially, I think that happens when you're in a group of people who you don't know super well. You don't know how to predict what they might say or how they might say it. And it can bring up some stuff that feels some sort of way. So what we hear from a lot of patients is, say they've joined a new group that is supportive to people with their disease. They might hear a lot of comparison. There's sometimes misinformation. We hear from a lot of folks that there's toxic positivity. We also hear a lot about compassion fatigue. And so some really concrete strategies I want you to go into any new support system with is that you're going to have time limits. You're going to center yourself. You're going to center your own needs, right? You can put content filters. One of my favorite parts of like the Instagram algorithm is you can go right into your settings and you can say, these are words that I don't want to have come up. And it doesn't always work, but it can be really helpful if that's a part of your life is scrolling on Instagram or looking at Facebook. And if that's a place where you find community, we can take the good with that and also try to mitigate some of the onslaught of information that can come through with these different algorithms, right? So again, curate your feed. If you are seeing something in an online forum or an algorithm type world that is not working for you, I want you to block that. I want you to not be looking at that. And diversify groups. So if you are a part of a few different groups that are really disease specific, then and you still are looking for some support, then I want you to try to find a group that has absolutely nothing to do with cancer as your next group that you're a part of. And I want you to take lots of breaks. You know, it is just as important to give your brain time to shut down and to rest and to take a step away from community as it is to engage with community. So it's okay if, you know, say in a week you've gone out to coffee with a friend and you've engaged in a somewhat informal support group. Maybe one of those days you say, you know what, I'm going to just sit at home with a cup of tea and a good book. And that is also restorative and helpful. It's all about balance here, right? So something that I want you to think about is that some settings are way more formalized and some are way less formalized. So a way to vet that, to figure out, is this group the right group for me, is look for environments that are supported by reputable organizations, like similar to that list I showed you earlier. And I asked you to take a picture of the national organizations that we know are doing this work and are building community, right? What makes those reputable in large part is that they have training for the people who are running the programs. They have moderation. They have people who are vetting the information that they're putting out. And that gets harder to do when you get to these more organic support communities that are in your life, like your family, your friends, people who maybe have been around in your life for a long time, and they are getting information from other places. But if you're going to join a more formalized support program, I would recommend looking for places and asking them what is the training or the moderation looking like for them. I also want to really put a nod to that it is important, not just okay, it is important to your care to seek spaces that are accessible and that are culturally relevant for you. Because every single human being on this earth has different accessibility needs in order to engage with things. So like we talked about earlier with having knowledge of what your barriers, your constraints, and your preferences are, that's all a part of your accessibility needs. And so for me to find something accessible, it might be different than what you find accessible, right? And there are certain people who their accessibility needs are more, you know, broadly experienced by other people. So those are things that are already kind of built into society. And there are certain people who their accessibility needs are not as commonly experienced, and unfortunately, it may be harder to access things. So what I mean by that is it is totally okay and valid to look for spaces that align with your identity or with the language that you speak. It may be helpful to you to find spaces that feel a little bit more personalized like that. And it's also really valid to ask for helpful accommodations. So if you have experienced hearing loss, you may want to ask for captioning. If you're thinking about joining a group and you have physical limitations, you may want to ask, how would you get to and from that group, transportation, childcare, etc. A big one that comes up for many of our patients is those who live in other time zones, people who might have been treated at the Farber but are from different areas or who have since moved away. How do they access, stuff that is happening in the Boston area? This is a really great example of it because this is a recorded webinar. You can access asynchronous information, things that are not happening in real time. And then I want to take some time and talk about if you are accessing new groups. Many of those are, this is kind of geared towards things that are online, but you may be accessing new groups in person. And I think there are some online privacy, considerations that I would like you to have. So in any online forum, I want you to use pseudonyms, not your real name, not your real contact information. You may want to disguise some of your medical information to some extent so that you're not identifiable by other people, especially if you don't see them in person. You don't know what that space is like. If you are in a more formalized or in-person space, you may want to find out what are the privacy rules. How is your private information kept private? I feel like that could be a whole discussion for another time. But some red flags that I think we see come up a lot in community support spaces are, advertising medical cures, pressure to buy something or to donate to something, medical advice that's not coming from doctors, harassment between groups. And so again, as you consider joining a new space, I want you to keep looking out for those things, but also see, are there ways that they manage that stuff if it comes up? Speaking about online forums, often there's a list of really specific rules or a moderator. In-person groups, again, you may go in and they may say, here's how we function as a group. I want you to look for that stuff because I think it makes it a lot more emotionally safe to be in those spaces. And I can't stress this enough. If you get any medical information in, an online group or from, your, again, well-meaning Aunt Ethel, right? It's not that we're going to throw that information out, but that really needs to be run by a doctor before you act on it. So we're kind of coming around to the end here. I want to take the information that you guys have worked on throughout this seminar and put it into an action plan so that you have some steps that are really tangible and scaffolded that you can then take into, as you start to build out your community and your support networks. So here's an example of an action plan. This may not be specifically how you follow it, but what has been done here is we've taken somebody's support needs and made them really small, bite-sized baby steps, right? So step one, we already did this today. Identify one need, one support need that you have. And you can also think of a couple of places where you may want to access that need and put them on a list. That to complete step one, you don't actually have to do any action. You just have to identify a few things, right? Step two, attend or observe one meeting. That could be as simple as, watching a recorded seminar. It could be as simple as, spending a little bit of time reading through an online forum, or, if we're talking a totally non-cancer related group, we've used the example of the knitting group, showing up to the knitting group. You don't have to do too much there. You just show up. Showing up, I have a mentor who always says showing up is 80%, right? That is all you need to do and you already have a B+. So then, step three, schedule one low stakes connection. So the example here is a 15-minute call or a walk, but find something that doesn't feel like you're putting too much of yourself out there, but that you can try, see how it feels, right? And sometimes people will find, okay, I've gotten to step three. That felt really hard and uncomfortable. Maybe you need to go back up to step one and try again and start working through the steps again. Step four, I think, is the most important step universally, which is evaluate the fit. So you can do that at any time and you can do it really regularly throughout your journey of creating more community. You can use a checklist, you can keep certain things, you can try something differently. Lots and lots of options for you. And part of that evaluating the fit is tracking what matters to you. So some examples of ways people might do this are weekly mood check-in of 0 to 10. So if you think about your mood on like that pain scale of like pretty good, pretty bad, right? Where do you fall in the past week? Where would you say you generally were? And if you can keep a list of that, you can look back at that over time and you can say, well, okay, so this week my mood was pretty okay. And I had engaged in a new group. So maybe that new group is something to keep trying, right? I also really like looking at your energy level after engagement. Do you walk out of spending time with somebody feeling fulfilled and feeling happy and optimistic? Or do you feel drained? And, that's important information for you to have. Um, Also looking at like how many times have you meaningfully connected with somebody over the past week? So different people want to use different ways to keep themselves accountable. I'm a huge fan of just keeping a little journal. Some people they might, keep something in the notes section of their phone. They might have calendar reminders of, okay, it's time this week to check in, just something that you can bring with you in these spaces. So one more pause to reflect here. I want you to ask yourself, what is one small step that you can take this week? So I'm going to end it with this. I really like this quote. Community isn't one bridge, it's a network you can build one small plank at a time. Your pace is the right pace. And we have some sources if you want to do any additional reading about this. And I am going to turn it back over to Sierra.
Thanks so much, Becca. That was a really great presentation. And as I mentioned earlier, this is recorded and it will be posted on our Blum YouTube playlist and our Blum Digital Resource Center. If anyone has any questions to our live audience, now is the time to ask. Maybe we'll give it a few minutes, Becca, to see if anyone has any questions. And of course, if anyone has questions after the fact when they're reviewing, they can reach out to me in the Blum Center, and I'd be happy to pass those along to you, Becca.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sarah.
So let's give it about a minute to see if any of our attendees have any questions for us. All right, it doesn't look like we have any, but thank you so much, Becca. We so appreciate you taking the time to present with us today, and we appreciate you sharing your expertise with us.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.